Okay, I have been talking on radio for the last few weeks about this. A book that isn't actually a book. It is a digital book that you can get on Kindle now. I can't even tell you for sure how I found it. It just kind of popped up. I was looking for something else. I clicked on it, which I never... Kindle also suggests that you should read it. All right. And then I clicked on that for some reason, and then I did something else I've never done, which is read the sample chapter. I did, and I'm telling you, I think it is one of the most important pieces of writing I have seen in quite some time. The Art of Being Unmistakable. Srini Rao is the guy who is the author. He is the heart of The Art of Being Unmistakable. And I reached out to him, was it last week?
I think it was like Monday of last week.
Yeah. And asked if you would be on the show. And you're not a guy that typically we don't run in the same circles.
We're kind of an odd pairing, wouldn't you say?
Yes. I mean, I put some carrot cake on because the producer said, let's see what you guys have in common. And we both have carrot cake in common. However, we have, I think, a soul in common, that we both know that people are not, it's like they're walking around in a fog, and they're not using or even understanding the power that they all have inside, right?
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting. I was thinking about this as I was sitting in the dressing room about kind of how my life has gone. And I was the poster child for society's life plan. I grew up in an Indian family. There were certain things that were expected, straight A's. And I credit my parents for that because they've given me a discipline that I brought into the work that I do even today. But what's interesting is you go through college and you get to a certain point. I got through college, and so at the end of college they say, hey, welcome to this thing called life. It's a masterpiece, but you can only paint with a few colors, meaning here are the career options that are put in front of you. And by the way, here's a bunch of imaginary lines. Make sure you don't color outside of them or don't paint outside of them.
Right.
And so that began a career of what has turned me into what I have called the self-proclaimed corporate misfit. I went to my first job. So there's always this inkling that something is wrong here, something is missing, and you're not seeing another side of this, that, hey, by the way, there's hundreds of other colors that you could paint this masterpiece with, but nobody's showing them to you. And by the way, that canvas is completely blank, and there's no instructions, there's no idea what's going to come. The outcomes on that canvas are completely uncertain.
Okay, so I've been having an argument with myself because I am a paint all out of the lines. And I've never liked anybody telling me what to do or how to do it. And I look at people and I see it in the box and I'm like, well, that's what you did. But that's not what I want to do. But there are people that are just box people, that they don't like an empty canvas. They don't know what to do with an empty canvas. So does this, and what we're going to talk about, does this fit everybody? Is everybody have...
Yeah, here's the thing, because, in a lot of ways, we're talking about it in the context of career. But what's great about the world we live in
life
today is that it doesn't matter whether it's in your career. If you want to create something, you have an opportunity to create it. Like, I am wearing a T-shirt that was made by a friend of mine because he had this desire to get a message out to the world on a T-shirt. And we couldn't do that 10 years ago. And now we can, and it's not limited to certain people. I think that we'd been brainwashed into this belief that this opportunity to make a dent in the universe or to change the world in some meaningful way was reserved for the select few, the Steve Jobs of the world, the Mark Cubans of the world. But suddenly, what's happened is that technology is democratizing our ability to make and create things, and what's even cooler is that the people who buy these, the people who support all of this stuff, they create it because of the relationship they have with the person who created it. It's something special because it came from within. Everything that I've put out into the world has my signature on it. I've talked about this in the book. And the thing is that that's not limited. And it doesn't matter what you do. You have an opportunity to put your signature on something. I was thinking about boarding an airline yesterday. And I said, this is one of the worst designed experiences we've ever had. How can we make this a more pleasurable experience? And I thought, why not? If I'm going to a certain destination, why not make my boarding pass a collector's item? And I have to give your producer credit for that because that was his idea, not mine. But I thought, that's such a simple example to say, let's take this boarding pass, and you know what? It's going to have, it'll be like a postcard of the destination that I'm going to. Suddenly, it adds a little more pleasure to a process that most of us find agonizing.
But I think the world, I mean, I think you look even at airlines, I think the entire system is going to break down. I think we are seeing the Industrial Revolution, which happened in a 100-year period. I think the next 10 years is the 100-year period of the Industrial Revolution. It's that kind of profound change where you had barely electric lights and flushable toilets to refrigerators. That took 100 years. And we're going to have that kind of change in the next 10, because the singularity is coming, and when it comes, people don't understand what's happening. And so when I read, this is one of the first things I read in this that caught my eye, and it's actually in the preface, and it says, can a computer do it for you? Can somebody overseas do it cheaper? What I'm offering in demand, is it in demand in an age of abundance? The only job security, to the extent that it exists, will reside in your ability to be high concept, high touch. And I started thinking that, okay, this is a book about jobs, that understands about jobs, but I think it's much more than that. I think it is about change your entire life. Because once you go down this wormhole, right, you change everything. So let's start that there first with 3 minutes of who you are and how you came to this.
Wow. Okay. So, as I mentioned, there was the Berkeley undergrad, the checkbox life, becoming the poster child for society's life plan. And as I said, I didn't fit. And so I kept getting fired from multiple jobs. I've been fired from almost every real job that I've been at, which is why I have such an aversion to real jobs. I don't like being in offices. I say I'm allergic to cubicles and corporate offices. And so, this continued, but the thing is that nobody said, hey, there's another way, there's other options out here, because this was, I think, post-2000, like the first dot-com bubble had burst. I graduated into one recession, and so after 10 years of sales jobs, about 7 years actually, of sales jobs and things that I just didn't like doing, I finally thought, I'm going to push the reset button on my life. I'm going to go to business school, and I'm going to wipe out this, crucible of a resume, which is what a career counselor who worked with me on my business school application called it. And I thought, okay, this is it. This is a chance to reinvent myself. And so that summer, I ended up interning.
More education.
Yeah. I mean, because that's what we believed. That's what we thought was the answer.
I know.
And so I ended up being an intern with Intuit's TurboTax group. And, at the end of the summer, not surprisingly now, knowing what I know about myself, I didn't get an offer. And my boss told me, he said, I'm doing you a huge favor. Trust me. And I jokingly say, well, considering I don't particularly enjoy paying taxes, I guess not working on them for a living worked out okay. But where it really became interesting was when I graduated. I graduated in April 2009. So, nobody plans for their life to have, you graduate from, 2 schools twice into recessions that are both horrendous. And that was rock bottom. That was it. It was kind of like, wow, I'm 30 years old. I have whatever financial aid money is left, and I moved home. I literally was out of money. But in the process, this is something I have to mention. One of the other things I discovered was this absolute love for surfing. And I'm not genetically predisposed for anything athletic. I was always the worst player. I was the most improved player on every sports team I've ever been on, which actually means you're the worst player on the team.
Right.
When, it takes a season to be called that. So, and surfing requires an insane amount of athletic skill. But I found that it was this just beautiful escape from everything else that was going on in my life. It's like, wow, my life is a disaster. It's a train wreck. I'm at rock bottom. But 6 hours a day, I'm in this medium that completely changes that and makes it seem so different so that my circumstances aren't going to become my identity. And in that process, I started playing with all these online tools. I ended up creating one blog. That eventually led to the formation of a show that I run today. Bit by bit, it all just started, coming together. And I created this show called Blogcast FM, where I've interviewed 400 plus bloggers, authors, content creators. I mean, the woman who wrote the foreword, the section that you were just reading, is a woman named Justine Musk, and I know her because she actually wrote she was one of the people I'd interviewed on my show. But I'm not going to tell you that it came without a lot of hurdles. This has been a roller coaster ride.
Could you say, and then we have to take a quick break, but if you were my son and you had finished everything and you said to me, I'm going to go surfing, I'd say, what? I'd have a really hard time. My father had a really hard time with me when I said, I'm going to leave radio. Mm-hmm. I was 35 years old. I'm going to leave radio. And he said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. But it was the moment of complete surrender. It was like, I don't know. I'm just no longer going to do what is not inside of me, right? My dad said, well, why don't you then find out what's inside of you? And that's what you did, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's deeply informed every single part of my life. I mean, I jokingly say the only thing I ever really wanted was to be able to surf every day. And I said, if, you know, however that was facilitated, I would do everything to make sure that happened.
So let's go into when we come back, I want to talk to you about the difference between a map versus a compass, a wish list versus prophecy, and the check boxes, the no BS version of you. We'll do that in a minute. Back in a second.